This function here is called an anonymous function. It doesn't have a name. It is assigned to this variable magic, but there's no word right before the function keyword to assign the name to the function. Whenever you have an anonymous function, you can convert it into an arrow function. That makes it a little quicker to write. So instead of the word function, I'm going to take that out completely and then put an arrow here. So this is the same thing, except it's just a little quicker to write. But we can shorten this even more. If we're just returning one value here, we don't even need the return keyword, and we don't need the curly braces. So I can delete all this, and I can delete all this here. And now this is the full function from before, but it's just really shortened up. And to make this even nicer, we're not going to use var. I'm going to change this to const. Just like in a normal function, you can pass arguments to arrow functions. So let me show you how to convert this function into an arrow function. So it's a normal function now, and it has two arguments, and then it's going to concatenate the two arrays passed in. So first, we'll take off the function keyword. We're going to leave these parentheses with the parameters. Now I'll put the arrow. Since all we're doing is returning this, we don't even need the return keyword, and we don't need the curly braces. So I'll take that off. We'll take this off. And now we've done this. I just converted that function into an arrow function, and it has these two parameters. So we just have the parameters in parentheses, we have the arrow, and then we have what's being returned right after the arrow. So if I run that, you'll see that we concatenate the two arrays that are passed in this example. And then for good measure, we'll change this to const. Arrow functions work really well with higher order functions such as map, filter, and reduce. I'll go into more detail at a different time about map, filter, and reduce, but the main thing to know is that they take functions as arguments for processing collections of data. Whenever one function takes another function as an argument, that's a good time for an arrow function. So what we're going to do here is we're going to update this function right here. We want it to compute the square of only the positive integers in the array. So it's pass in this array, which is this, and we want to filter out everything that's not a positive integer. So I'm going to use the filter and map functions to do that. But the main thing I want you to look at is the arrow functions that I'm passing into filter and map. This line is going to be a lot more succinct because of the arrow functions. So we have the squared integers is going to be the r, and we're going to filter this. So dot filter. Now, again, I'm not really going to explain in detail what the filter function does, but that will be something for another time. Just look at this arrow function. We're going to create this arrow function by starting it just like this. Now, before I showed you that you pass in arguments in parentheses for an arrow function. But if you only have a single argument like this, the number argument, you don't need parentheses around the argument. You can just put the argument and then the arrow. So this is the beginning of the arrow function, and then we'll see what's returned from the arrow function. First, we want to filter this array so we only have numbers that are integers and numbers that are more than 0. So we'll do number dot is integer, and then we will pass in the number, and number is more than 0. So let me complete the parentheses here. Now, the result of this filter command will be an array with all the numbers that are more than 0 and also integers. So there'll be 4, 42, and 6. But after we get that new array, we want to get the square of each number in that array. So that's where we're going to use the map function. Now the map function takes a function as its argument. But instead of writing a full function out, we can use an arrow function. So we're going to pass in x to the function, and then there's going to be an arrow function. Now, x just means every element from the array that's being passed to it. So remember, the map is getting the array 4, 42, 6. X means for every element in the array, this is what we're going to do to it. X times X, because it's going to be squared. Again, the main point of this lesson is not to understand the filter and map functions, but to see that we can put an arrow function, we can pass in an arrow function, and it makes it so we can fit everything really succinctly on one line. So let's reload this and see if it works. Now we have 16, 1,764, and 36. In order to create more flexible functions, you can use default parameters. The default parameter kicks in when the argument is not specified or is undefined. So for instance, with this increment function, we want to change it. We want to change the increment function so you can pass in 2 arguments, the 5 and 2, to increment by 2, or you can just pass in the 1 argument, the 5, if you want to increment by 1. So here are the numbers we're passing in, a number and a value. So we just have to put value equals 1. So now, if a value isn't passed in, it will be set to 1 automatically. But if it is passed in, it will be set to whatever's passed in. So if we run this, we can look on the console. We have 7 for this first one and 6 for the second.